This is Cwm Idwal National Nature Reserve, and we're right by the edge of Llyn Idwal, which is in the centre of Cwm Idwal. It is managed in partnership between the National Trust, National Park and Natural Resources Wales. The geology we have here and the botany makes it an excellent outdoor classroom. Down the bottom by Llyn Ogwen, we've got the interpretation room run by the partnership, and both Llyn Ogwen Cottage run by the National Trust. We want to try and encourage people who can come up to Cwm Idwal to come up to Cwm Idwal. This is why we design paths like we have behind me. We try to make paths of people available for people of all abilities. These are stone pitched paths, which are a feature we see in the Highlands. The stone is carried by helicopter here and pitched in the traditional method. By making suitable paths, we keep people on the paths rather than on the sensitive habitats we have either side.
I often bring groups of school children and college students up here, including a lot of societies who want to learn about the place. And one of the main things that I talk about, because it's of interest to me, is the geology here. It's exceptional in Cwm Idwal, and it's a fantastic example of a volcanic landscape that's been folded and mashed up over hundreds of millions of years and has been subsequently exposed by the work of glaciers. So we've climbed up slightly higher now to the back of Cwm Idwal, just below Twll or Devil's Kitchen. Behind me, Llyn Idwal, and then further on, Llyn Ogwen, the lakes there. And behind me over this shoulder, we've got some classic examples of Arctic alpines. We've got the moss campion and the roseroot, both very special plants, and they're here mainly because of the geology of the rock underneath. It's slightly less acidic than what's around us.
We're here now in August, and we can see a big difference in what we saw earlier. Most of the Arctic alpine plants are past their best now, but what we can see is a massive increase in flowering of the dry and wet heath plants, in other words the heather communities. Grazing was removed from here approximately 20 years ago. If you look around, you can see how the impact of grazing has an effect on the vegetation. Immediately adjacent to us is a grazed area. This is the mountain of Blaen and Ant. Sheep graze this area and cattle graze it. But once we go into Cwm Idwal, you'll see that there is very little sheep grazing and no cattle grazing, and there is a major change in the vegetation. I'm now standing in a sea of purple, in a sea of mature Calluna vulgaris and other heathland species. What a change that has occurred here in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, this slope was nothing but grassland, inverted commas, with a certain amount of other plants in it, and hardly any indication of Calluna and the dry heathland that we've got here now. We're now at the base of Clogwyn y Geir, adjacent to Twll, the Devil's Kitchen. We're on the steep slopes of Devil's Kitchen at the western end of Cwm Idwal. This is the highlight of any visit to Cwm Idwal, to look at montane and Arctic alpine plants.
On the gripping behind me, which is on the skyline, there are fossils of brachiopods. These are creatures that lived under the sea 400 million years ago. 12,000 years ago, it was the end of the glacial period where the ice went away. About 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, the late Mesolithic period, we've got evidence of the human inhabitants of Cwm Idwal, which have left artefacts and they have left place names, surviving place names. Cwm Idwal National Nature Reserve has been here for 60 years, which in the grand scheme of things is a blink of an eye. We've done so much in that 60 years in terms of conservation, education and recreation. Today, looking forward, we'll try and develop those areas, and we'll use both Llyn Ogwen Cottage to further develop education, recreation and conservation for future generations.